I am reviewing the 2-tube FM radio that I got from Aliexpress, and this cost me about $37 total. So I'm gonna go and explain, how it went and what the problems were and how I solved those problems. So I got this kit because it looked pretty fun. It comes with just about everything you see here, including the base. And I got this particular tube unit because it can run off the AC. So you can plug this in and get power that way, because most of these tube kits, they actually run on batteries, and you need one set of batteries to actually light up the filaments, and then you need to string together like a 5 or 6 9-volt batteries to get the high voltage needed to run these tubes here. So this is a schematic of this tube here, and I just thought it was interesting to explain how these tubes work, and that this particular unit, so it generates 110 volts. So this is actually live. 110 volts comes over here, and what that does is that we have the negative connection over here, and it attracts electrons to that positive plate, which is at 100 volts. And the thing is that it would normally flow like a short circuit, but if you put a signal in between here, like a negative signal, then that can actually block some of the signal. So the more signal you stick in here, the more it will block. But if you put in like a variable AC signal here, then that will cause the current to rise and fall, and that is how you get amplification in a vacuum tube instead of using a transistor. And the FM circuit is surprisingly simple. I'm still not quite sure how this works. All there are these you can see these 2 loops here. That forms, I don't know, what looks like a transformer here, and then we have the variable capacitor, and somehow that puts the signal here into pin 1. And there are 2 tubes, so I presume the signal then travels to the second tube, pin 1, which eventually drives the speaker. So I got it all put together, and I found that, this is the antenna wire here, and you need like a super long antenna wire. So, 30 feet is something you're gonna need. Otherwise, it doesn't work at all. The other thing I found is that the volume coming out of this thing as built is extremely, extremely low. I mean, you have to put your ear right up to it to hear it. But, it does definitely receive FM radio channels, and, you can tune it, but it only seemed to receive a certain part of the band. It's like I couldn't receive any radio signals down when it was adjusted this way. But there was definitely a radio signal that could be received, but it was so incredibly quiet that, I attached it to my portable boombox here and turned it up just so you could barely hear it. Okay, so I thought there might have been something wrong with this, or maybe that's just the way the kit comes. So what I did is that I have my handy dandy oscilloscope here. So if you guys aren't familiar, this is a DSO shell oscilloscope, and this runs only about $35, and you really need one of these to diagnose something like this. So what I did is I got my signal generator here, and what I did is that you inject a signal into the circuit, and then you trace to see what happens to it, okay? So my first mistake was that you need to put in a little capacitor here, because at some point I think I connected this thing up to the 110 volts, and that blew it out. So I actually had to buy another one of these kits in order to fix it, because the price of the kit is less than the price of the IC that got blown out. So let that be a lesson. So you can see the signal there. So I injected the signal into the number 1 pin here. And then when I did that, I could hear a loud signal that was coming out of my generator. So it seemed like, things were kind of working here. So it's like the 1/10 of a volt is coming out of the signal generator. And then out here at this point, we're getting maybe 1.8 or 2 volts or so. 2 volts are coming in here, and by the time it gets over here, it was actually almost 60 volts. So it definitely seemed like the amplification was working. It's just that the power that's coming out of this FM section, it just isn't enough to be practical. So, you know, it technically works, but, you know, not in any practical fashion. But just like being in Mythbusters, where you find out, it doesn't work, we're going to make it work anyways. So what I did was that instead of putting the signal generator in there, I just stuck a regular FM radio in there, right? So I have this feeding to the pin 1. And so now when I turn on the radio, wait 10 seconds for things to start glowing in there. And that's the most interesting thing about this. And then there we go. Then we have the radio working. So the amplifier definitely works. But, you know, I had to like use a whole FM radio to make this thing actually behave like an FM radio. But that's one way to do it. So that would be my review. And also another little interesting tidbit is that I'm actually driving my DSO shell off of a standard power bank. This is 5 volts, but the DSO shell needs 9 volts. You'd think they'd just make enough space to stick a 9-volt battery in there, but no. So what I have here is I have a DC to DC power converters is converting the 5 volts into the 9 volts. So that's how I hacked that. But that's all the hacks, and this is what you can expect to do if you buy one of these radio kits.